Yesterday we were responding to your question, first of all. Another thought came to mind. We were already well past 5 o'clock by then and ready for a break. But another thought came to mind with that area. So in the Vedic tradition, that quality of wisdom, like what we call vichar, that kind of subjectless, objectless awareness, the practice of Advaita Vedanta is exactly aimed at that. So, A means not, Dva is two, Vedanta is the study of, or the practice of. So that the practice of not two-ness, and that two is subject and object in my understanding of it. So through that Vedic tradition and the kind of the yogic tradition and practices, they're aiming at that same quality of non-dual awareness. So we use the word non-duality in the English language to refer to that same area. So subjectless, objectless awareness is a bit of a clunky term, but that did come to mind as that those match onto each other very directly, and that also interestingly, in the last few years of Ajahn Buddhadasa's teaching career, I was very fortunate to go and spend about 2 weeks down at Suwannwalk in 1988, and he was giving Dhamma talks every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning at dawn, surrounded by chickens, and about 50 mostly foreigners doing a retreat. About half of them were experienced meditators and half of them seemed to be straight off the beach. But he would be giving these extremely profound Dhamma teachings at 5 o'clock every morning. And the theme he was talking about over and over again was around a word called atamayata. And it wasn't a word I was familiar with at all. But he was highlighting this. He said, this is the ultimate Buddhist concept. This is the most profound kind of wisdom. He said, and he's an extremely gifted scholar as well as being an accomplished meditator. And it seems like the last 2 years of his life, that was the focus of most of his teaching, was this one quality of atamayata. And it only appears about 5 or 6 times in the Pali Canon, so it's not used very often. But he said, this is the final word of Buddhism. And it's very close to, it's like a Pali version of Advaita, because the word it's a long Pali word, atamayata, but it's made up of several pieces. A, meaning not, tam, meaning that, maya, meaning made of, and then da at the end is ness, not made of that ness. And it's a kind of a way of speaking about the quality of wisdom that is completely unattached or unaffected by the qualities of subject or object. So, and the word comes from the understanding in the Indian world of that time of how perception worked. So, in terms of the sort of physics of perception, it was understood when you see an object, a kind of ray of energy comes out from your eye, occupies the object, and then comes back. And so and when it goes out to occupy the object, that's called in Pali, that is tanmayata, consisting of that. So it's like that going outness, in taking hold of an object and then coming back again. So that's tanmayata, consisting of that, and atamayata is not doing that. So the word is based on that, the kind of belief in how perception worked in the Buddha's time, and so that it's the mind which is aware, but it's not going out to make things or thoughts or emotions solid or form. It's not consisting of that. It's not becoming kind of embodied in that, not identifying with that. And so that because it doesn't appear very often in the Pali Canon, and it's a subtle term. It's been translated in different ways. So into English, Bhikkhu Bodhi translates it as non-identification, and which is talking about the subject side. Ajahn Thanissaro was a very prolific translator and scholar monk as well. He translates it as non-fashioning, relating to the object side, the kind of the. But I would say it's again subjectless, objectless. It's letting go of the knower and letting go of the known. So there is just the knowing, and so it's a subtle area of wisdom or of awareness, but I feel that's I say it's helpful to know that term, and someone as a greater practitioner and scholar as Ajahn Buddhadasa spent 3 or 4 years just on that that one subject. He really wanted to get that into the mindset of Dhamma practitioners, like get to know this word. This is important, and he. Those of you who may have read many of his books or listened to many of his talks will already be familiar that he talked about the 9 das and the ta at the end of the Pali, like anicca, dukkha, anatta. So the ta at the end of those words means ness. So anicca means impermanent. Anicca means impermanence or impermanentness. So, yeah. So it's the quality of. So anicca is an adjective. It's describing that is impermanent, it's transient, and then the da at the end it's the quality of being impermanent. So impermanence or impermanentness, or anatta means not self. Anattata means not selfness. So anyway, he talked about the 9 das as a kind of pun because the da is also the I. So with a different pronunciation, different tone probably. The ta is the da is the I. So these are the 9 eyes that we see reality through. So the first 3, anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, not selfness, and then the middle 3 were Dhamma, which means formed according to according to nature, according to Dhamma. Dhamma following the laws of nature, and then idapacayata, subject to the laws of causality, cause and effect. So those are the middle 3. Note takers are being very busy. So Dhamma-tittata, Dhamma-niyamata, and idapacayata. Ajahn Buddhadasa also wrote a lot about idapacayata, conditionality, many books and words on that. And then the last 3, which he would speak of as the most refined, these are all characteristics of all existent things, is sunyata, emptiness, tathata, suchness, and atamayata. So atamayata was sort of number 9 on the list of 9. So sunyata, tathata, and atamayata. So a lot could be said about all of this, but I thought just following along with that discussion yesterday, and also just maybe mentioning this afternoon with respect to those last 3, I feel they're also very significant in terms of refining the quality of wisdom and kind of perfecting the 3rd exit point, the establishing the citta in awareness, in vijja. So this is all kind of exit point 3 material, helping the mind to be awake. So sunyata, emptiness, is the skillful way of relating to the 5 khandhas. We assume that the 5 khandhas are solid and real, like there's a floor, there's a building, there's a person, this is a thing, this is a word, right? So the reflections on emptiness are saying, no, the 5 khandhas are empty, they're hollow, they're void, they're insubstantial. There's a form, there's no substance. So sunyata is a way of saying no. to the five khandhas. No, you are not solid, you're not real, you're not absolute. Blaiwang, let go. And then tatata, suchness, is a way of saying yes to the Dhamma, to reality, to that transcendent truth. And again, those of you who've listened to Luang Por Sumedho's talks will realize he uses words like, this is the way it is, or it's like this. He even had a whole, somebody gave him a whole bag full of little enamel badges saying, it's like this. he could give out to people. They're very precious now. So it's like this, and that those teachings, this is the way it is, it's like this. These are teachings about suchness, tatata. So that's it's that undefinable quality of presence. That is the presence of the Dhamma that can't really be described, but is absolutely real. So sunyata is saying no to the five khandhas, tatata is saying yes to the Dhamma, and then atamayata is the sort of the final word, is a way of saying that the any creation of subject and object is always going to be an obscuration. So let go of a subject, let go of an object, and let the mind be perfectly awake. And so not even thinking about things in any kind of dualistic way. So anyway, that was a few follow-on thoughts from about exit point number 3. So anyway, any questions for this afternoon? Yes.
Good afternoon, Ajahn. My question relates to habit forming, and the links of Vedana, Tanha, Upadana, and whatever comes after that.
Bhava.
So I've read a book a couple of years ago, which is called The Power of Habit. It's one of these bestsellers that sell on every airport. And
popular psychology.
Yes, exactly. I think it's written by a psychologist who works in marketing or something like that. So there was some. Basically, what he says about habits is that this is something that is very hardwired in our physiology, and that works based on a cue, then a reactivity to that, and that has to be rewarded by something which releases dopamine usually, which is the big bang in our system, the big winner. And so now to my question, I assume that until mindfulness is established because Vedana happens all the time, it comes all the time, and habits also basically run our lives to a huge extent. And so until mindfulness has ripened in daily life to an extent where we actually catch these Vedanas happening and we don't get triggered into the automatic responses that then release dopamine and that keeps the cycle going, it would be very nice to get some hacks, some Buddhist hacks that until we reach that level of maturity, help us to not always be automatically triggered that way of dopamine, or maybe have Buddhist dopamine instead that helps us along the way.
Yeah. Interestingly, a psychiatrist that I met who lives in New Zealand, he's just written a book sort of like, on Buddhist hacks. I think it's aiming to be a kind of pop psychology book that people pick off the shelves at airports. And he asked me to sort of read through it and give him feedback. So I can understand the territory. So anyway, the one of the things that dopamine and the way that sort of brain chemistry works, that's a lot to do with one kind of happiness. And the word I was quoting earlier, asada, is more accurately translated as gratification. But that's what drives a lot of our lives. That's the kind of the dopamine landing in the lateral tegmentum in the brain. That's the That's the landing spot. When the dopamine hits that spot in the brain, it's the yes. That's the trigger. So that's a gratification that we experience, and that drives a lot of the economy and people's lives. But the other kind of happiness is sukha, which is a more profound quality of fulfillment and contentment and ease. And so that sukha is not based on external, it's not dependent on external, say, perceptions or activities. It's coming from within. So the Buddhist dopamine is sukha, not zucca, as in sugar. Ironically, strangely close to the word for sugar. Yeah, sugar is happiness. No, sukha, not sucre. So and again, Ajahn Buddhadasa's writings on this are very, very clear and extremely helpful, where he talks about two kinds of happiness and spells it out. Worldly happiness is what most of our lives are built around, chasing after that dopamine hit through food, through publishing academic papers, through having attractive partners, or large, expensive wristwatches, or small, extremely expensive wristwatches, or whatever it might be. That kind of worldly happiness is one kind, but the happy, and you can call that the happiness of getting what you want. And the other kind of happiness, which is based on insight and a realization of Dhamma, is the happiness of not wanting anything, of recognizing the quality of completeness in each moment. So that it doesn't mean that sugar is not sweet, or that you're not happy when the publisher says, yes, your book's ready to go. But you also realize, well, that's just a flash of gratification because the publisher accepted my book. That's all. It's not anything substantial or absolute. So that training and the development of insight is the alternative path. So that's a happiness which is independent of circumstances. You can literally be on your deathbed and having unstoppable pain and be completely content. And as the kind of conditions that people have come up in some of the conversations where the body is so ill that you can't take enough morphine to dull the pain. Ajahn Jiew was talking about Lumpur Plian, but Lumpur Plian, the sabai, even though there's all that pain, so much pain, the morphine couldn't quell it, but still, chui, and very happy. So that and I'm not in the kind of false sort of putting a brave face on it, trying to be cheerful, but really happy. Like, here it is. And so that is the result of mind training. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the realization of Dhamma, that suchness. So this is the way it is. That opening of the heart to the present reality, and realizing that in this moment, nothing is missing. Nothing could be missing. The universe. How could the universe be incomplete right now? Not from in a logical way necessarily, but from the heart's appreciation of the reality of Dhamma. So that happiness is it comes from that realization of Dhamma, and effectively the embodiment of Dhamma, the citta awakening to its own nature, which is Dhamma itself. So that's a happiness that doesn't depend on physical comfort or people liking you or the weather or any sound or smell or taste or touch. It's completely independent of the sensory field, as it's absolutely a quality of the citta itself. So I don't know how you would market that, but it's much more reliable and robust kind of happiness that doesn't depend on having a lot of a whole complex support system to make me feel good. And I think that's why there are all these mindfulness programs, and people like my friend Tony doing his mindful hacks for the 21st century. That that people are weary of trying to get the dopamine hit and realizing it doesn't really work, and that the other track through mindfulness and the development of insight, that's leads to a much more reliable and dependable, robust kind of happiness, and it's far more profound.
Good afternoon, ค่ะนมัสการพระอาจารย์ more hack will be requested.
I can't remember the name of his book now. It'll come to me.
2 days ago, you mentioned that you spent 10 years trying to be the perfect monk, and then eventually you find out that the way is actually be ordinary. So I just would like to ask if you could kindly share with us the experience about the transition and any hack or tips of making that transition happen. Like how to practice the mind to let go of being perfectionist or trying to overachieve and all that.
Yes, it was quite a program, because I like going down a long road, and you don't even realize that you've made a choice and that there's an effect of going down a particular track. So I didn't realize the extent to which I'd set my whole life up, so trying to do everything in such a way. So as I started to look at it, and realize because the trigger was the sense of I was, as I mentioned, just felt overstuffed. All these things I'm doing that's supposed to be renunciate, siya salah, but it was not. It was like get why. I was kind of collecting all these things. So I had a whole set of extra kind of practices I would do. I would always stay up late in the evening. I would do all these pujas that other people weren't doing. I was extremely strict, kind of hyper strict vegetarian. I would always be tidying up after other people. I said, as I had an open door policy, anyone could come and visit me at any time. I always, any invitation or any possibility to volunteer for anything, I always said yes. So there's a whole kind of catalogue of stuff, both sort of in the formal spiritual domain and also in the social domain. And once I had sort of got the cue, like I'm really kind of carrying all these renunciations around. Okay, I've got to do something about this. And when I started to look, okay, what's this road I've gone down? And it's like, oh my goodness, just really appreciating the list of stuff I was doing. And so then I didn't work it all out on paper, but just had this basic idea. Okay, I'm going to just let go of a lot of that. So I stopped being so strictly vegetarian. I started not cleaning up after other people. It was quite an effort, so that if I saw a sweet wrapper on the ground at Amaravati, rather than picking it up and taking it to the rubbish bin, I'd walk past it. It's like, I should. And it took quite a bit of effort to walk past it and realize, well, in and of itself, that is not rubbish. I call it rubbish. And I say it shouldn't be there, but from its own side, it's just being what it is. It's just that. And the mind says rubbish shouldn't be there, but in itself, it's so that. And then making the sign, delighting in solitude from my door, so the door is closed. Not volunteering for everything, and so I was also necessary to receive a bit of negativity from people because they were so used to Ajahn Amaro always volunteers for everything. He's always available. He can do anything and everything. So then suddenly it was like the people were resentful. So part of it was receiving people's resentment because my style was changing. Now he's become selfish. He doesn't care. And so one of the practices that I developed at that time was I called being misunderstood and misrepresented. This is advanced practice. So when people criticize you, and you know they're criticizing you for the wrong reason, and you don't jump in and explain yourself. Yeah, exactly. Ooh. Very difficult. That's advanced practice. I'm serious, deadly serious. It was because my inclination was to say, but let me explain. But in that, I was reminded there was a teaching in the writings of Confucius from China, Confucius, which says, "Those who justify themselves do not convince." So that, and I have a very strong self-justification program. So, so then there's many things like that. But also along with that, so I would notice the dynamic of walking past a piece of rubbish, and then but I should, and then but then after I'd walk past it, looking and seeing how does that feel, that sense of relief, or not volunteering for doing the washing up or joining in some work task, and then getting the looks from other people and think, but let me explain, and letting that kind of flow through consciously, like the physical sensation of wanting to justify or explain or not wanting to be disliked, just letting that flow through, and then after that the same. So, and I've mentioned in many of the discussions, and in these Q&As and the talks, it's really important when we apply some practice, consciously notice the effect of that practice rather than getting busy with doing the thing. Pay attention to what the result of the thing is. And so then I kept noticing, oh, this is really peaceful. I think I'm on the right track now. Also, there's a big clue in the Thai language that the word tammada means ordinary, right? Ordinary, not special, unremarkable. If you look at how tammada is spelt, what do you find? Dhammata. So that is, it means that hidden in the ordinary is the Dhamma itself. It's right there in your language, staring you in the face. So Dhamma, and that's where the word tammada comes from, the Pali word dhammata, of the nature of Dhamma. So what we call ordinary, hidden inside the ordinary, is the Dhamma itself. So, in terms of other people's lives, I can't speak for you, but it was just wherever I saw there was me doing something special to fit some kind of ideal. As I said, I didn't lie down for 3.5 years. So I started lying down to sleep, which was very strange at first. And then giving up all my food practices and chanting, extra chanting, and being so sort of fixated on all of that. Then just wherever I found that kind of specialness was had parked itself, to look at that and then to stop following that, and then just watching how things unfolded. And then, as I mentioned, that other monk who said to me, "You're much easier to live with since you stopped trying to be perfect." I took that quite seriously. I thought, that's a good sign. It's kind of insulting that I didn't realize I was so difficult to live with. I thought I was being impressive, but I was just being irritating. But that I took that was a good sign. And so, then the inner critic can say, "Oh, you're just being lazy, or you don't really care, or you're just making excuses not to bother." And so, if that arises, then say, "Okay, well, is that the case? Am I really being lazy? Do I really not care, or what's going on here?" So that kind of reflection, exploring that, and also just seeing how I was kind of addicted to people's approval, and I could see that I was when I said something that didn't raise a laugh in the group or wasn't impressive, then I feel like I broke into a million pieces. Or when I did impress people, or I got some kind of approval, I think, serious endorphin splash. Like, yes. And seeing how that's ridiculous. And then also reflecting on my life, that going back to about 3 years old, like I was the youngest of 3 children, and I was basically jealous of my sisters because they could read books and I couldn't, and I wanted what they had. so I learned to read when I was about 3, and I could read and write. And so then, and I was quite successful at school, and my sisters too, particularly my elder sister. So I realized that from that kind of kindergarten conditioning, when you get full marks, so you get 10 out of 10, you get sort of a big smile from the teacher, and you get a gold star, and you get top of the class, and then you get a certificate, and the parents are happy, and so all of this sort of positive conditioning. I realized that's I'm still addicted to that approval and success that started at about 3 years old, and the kind of the downside of being successful is that you get a lot of that. You get a lot of points along the way, and so and my life had been a lot like that. I'm very fortunately very gifted, academically in sports. I was a county champion at athletics and such like, and captain of the rugby team and all those things. So, you get a lot of points. And so I realized when I started to look at this sort of 10 years into monastic life, like it would be much better if I had done more failing along the way, or not, and hadn't had such a kind of successful time in my school career and sports and such like. It's not that I succeeded at everything, but there was a lot of that, and that the addiction had really got wedged, firmly wedged in place. Like, this is good, me winning, good, and so that's the drug of choice. Is that feeling of me winning, me getting the prize, me being successful, and getting praised, and so then appreciating that and the kind of track of where that began. And so I didn't resent my teachers or my parents, or it was like just seeing how that whole process had formed. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of where it began, and so then I'm still habituated to that. So let's see if I can get off the drug, and so not deliberately not trying to be sort of special or perfect or doing things better than everybody else, just being ordinary, like being the average student. And when I would bring up that kind of a thought, some people go, no, 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 no. Oh, that's interesting. That was kind of revealed that habit, the strength of fixation on that. And I didn't get pushed. Both my parents were academic failures, so it wasn't a lot of pressure from mum and dad. And they were kind of surprised when my sisters and I would come back with high marks on our tests, and they go, "Really? Where did you come from? Where did you come from?" Yeah. So we didn't get pressure, so it wasn't being forced to succeed by the family at all, which many people have a lot of. But it was just the machinery of the system, and how, because I had quite a lot of success, then I kind of fed on that, was addicted to that, and to like getting off any kind of a drug. There's withdrawal symptoms, and trying to compensate and to find a way of dealing with that. So, but once I could recognize the causal chain, then that was enormously helpful. This is like I was talking about with Dhammanyutta, the kind of the first one of the Sapurisa Dhammas, that recognizing the causes of things. Oh, that's where this has come from. Aha, look at that. And then seeing, because of these causes, there is this effect. Aha. So there's a few hacks on how to not be perfect. With all due respect, my elder sister is still deeply committed to being perfect. We were having it was my younger sister's 70th birthday, and they'd rented a cottage in the countryside where we all grew up, and we're doing a lot of reminiscing about our childhood and people that we knew. And one of the neighbors mentioned that so we were talking about one of the neighbors in the farm next door, and they said, "Oh, the daughter Susie got married to a Polish soldier," and I said, "Oh yeah, his name was Krzyzewicki," and my elder sister went, she couldn't remember his name, and I had remembered it. I could feel this sort of the wheels turning. Like, she didn't get upset, but she did make a comment about, "Oh yes, I hadn't remembered that." Like, if the program was operating properly, she would have remembered. But somehow, the name of a Polish, the neighbor's husband in 1968 or something, when she married him, it was just right there. But my dear sister is still committed to being perfect. Anyway, so please, other questions?
Yeah, Chan. This question is pertaining to the passing of the body. So, last few days I've been reading a lot, the impermanence, and I'm just wondering what happens when a body passes. What happens to our soul, our spirit? Where does it go, and how does it get reborn, or if we're out of the cycle or in the cycle? If you could just frame it in a simple way for me to understand, that would be very helpful.
Well, first of all, I don't have any direct knowledge that I'm aware of. But the idea of, when I first came across the idea of past lives and future lives, when I was about 8 or 9, I saw a movie when I was in 1965. So I'd have been about 8 or 9. And part of the plot was a person who had been reborn in the current times, and he'd had a life before and shared a life with another of the characters in the story. And it just made perfect sense to me. It's like, oh, right. Immediately, and so as soon as because the idea of that Church of England Christianity, sort of coming out of nowhere, being born, and then you live your human life, and then you go off after you die to heaven or hell for eternity. I got as far as like, that doesn't make sense. And I was, from the age of about 7 or so, I was trying to figure these things out. I thought, that does not make sense. But I didn't have any alternative. But that was the Church of England Christian sort of model. You come out of nowhere. You're a sort of soul conjured into being through your parents giving birth to you, and then you live this human life. Then you go off to heaven or hell. There's no purgatory in the Church of England. It's the Catholic option. But so that doesn't make sense. That can't be right. And the whole role of Jesus in the picture was like, that doesn't make sense either. So this idea of past lives and future lives, that makes sense. So it surprises me when I come across Buddhists who don't like the idea of past lives and future lives, and a scientific materialist perspective. And I have to be reminded, oh yeah, some people don't like that idea. Because to me, it's always seemed like kind of obvious. That's how it works. And so when we talk about it simply, I'd say what gets reborn is habits. What you love, what you hate, what's familiar. If you're familiar with physics, the law of conservation of energy, pretty much how it works. So that whatever momentum there is in the system, the mind attached to a particular smell, a particular taste, a particular relationship, something that was traumatic and terrifying, something that was wonderful and beautiful, something that was familiar. That's whatever the mind is identified with, then that habit will tend to carry on. And so then the consciousness that is, say, remaining, or that is, say, affected by the those attachments, then it will go and gravitate to a lifetime, to a place of birth where it can experience those same things, again. And so, in that respect, people tend to find themselves, just as you find in the Jataka stories, the Buddha and Ananda and Upalavanna and Kema and Sariputta Moggallana, Devadatta, they keep kind of coming around and around and meeting each other in different lifetimes and having different relationships with each other. Sometimes junior, sometimes younger, sometimes the hero, sometimes the villain. So we get drawn to what we love, what we hate, and what we're familiar. So be careful what you hate, because that's as tight a bond as love. When again, another dialogue between the Buddha and Vacchagotta asks the Buddha, when one life comes to an end and before another life comes into existence, what sustains a being from one life to another? And this particular teaching, the sutta, the Buddha says, well, just like in a forest fire, when flames leap from one tree to another, they are fueled by the air. So the Buddha knew about oxygen. That's what is the fuel. Then he says, tanupadana. So craving is the fuel. So upadana doesn't just mean clinging. It also means fuel, like petrol or firewood. So craving, tanha, is the fuel that causes, that sustains a being from one life, when one life comes to an end and before the next life begins. So that, to me, that's the pattern of how it works. And that I can't say that I can categorically prove that, but it's always made sense to me. And then there's many stories of people with past life memories or things that they know that there's and very well accredited stories like I've known people directly say when their child says to them at the age of 2 or 3, can I go home? And they say, well, you are home. This is your home. No, I want to go to my mum and my real mum and dad. We're your mum and dad. No, my real mother and father. I'd like to go home, please. And then the parents talking with the child. And this one family I knew up in the north of England, and their child, who was born in Newcastle in the north of England, was mentioning that the name was a village out in the countryside outside of Colombo, and the parents, the mother's name is this, the father's name is that, and this is the name of the village, and this is our house, and can I go home, please? And so the dad was a psychiatrist and kind of interested that, this boy is saying, and they thought it was just kind of making stuff up. But they were back in Sri Lanka visiting their family in Colombo. They thought, let's take a look at a map. This was before the internet. And look, there's a village that's just 30 miles outside of Colombo, and it's got that name. And they go to the village and they say, oh, is there a couple called Sumitra and Vish? Oh yeah, they live down. Yeah. And they're on that end of the village. And they go down. There's this couple, a little bit older than them, and their son had died about 7 years previously, and he had been a mechanic in a local garage, and their house had been burgled. And when he surprised the burglars, they had hit him over the head, and he died. And this kid had a birthmark on the side of his head. And they were showing me this, and the little kid lifts his hair up, and sure enough, there's this kind of birthmark on the side of his head. So, that's one family. They got absolutely no vested interest. They're not publishing books. They're not selling themselves. The guy's a professional medical professional. And so why would they be lying? Why would they make that up? And how can you explain it otherwise? And then this little kid, like at 3 or 4 years old, starts talking about a village in Sri Lanka where he's never been, and names of people he couldn't know. There's no explanation other than that was one life resonating with another. So I think to me that's how it works, and I feel very comfortable with that. And as I was kind of making a joke about all the photographs of me at kind of 1 or 1.5 years old, I'm kind of grumpy. I was kind of joking, not joking, like that look on my face is like, this wasn't supposed to happen. You know, I didn't want to come back. That's what projecting onto that grumpy 1-year-old face. Like, maybe I'm not thinking that. I can't tell, but there's no picture of me smiling as a baby. So scowling like, I do not agree. So then the many and various teachings that you have in the Pali Canon about that, I say that when another one that's very helpful is that somebody asks the Buddha, so a being from a previous life and then the life following after, are they the same person or are they different? Fair enough question. And the Buddha said, well, can I ask you, think back to a time when you were a newborn infant. You're a little baby. Are you the same person or are you different? He said, well, I'm different, but there's a connection. Exactly. You can't say, because the adult couldn't be there unless the baby was there, but the adult is not the same as the baby. And so that there's a causal relationship, but you can't say it's the same person. And so part of the Buddha's insight about anatta was that the Vedic belief from the Hindu tradition was this sort of bubble of selfhood, the Atman, kind of this sort of independent sort of true self, went and inhabited different bodies and different lives. And there was this single independent sort of bubble of selfhood that went from one life to another to another. And part of his insight of the enlightenment was like, that's not how it works. It might look like that, but that's not the way it works. So he then based his teaching around anatta, not self, rather than the idea of an atman, a true self or a real self. That he saw that any kind of I making and mind making is going to be delusory. It's not going to be accurate. And so there's a reality, but that reality, which we call Dhamma, but that reality is not a person, doesn't belong to a person. And so as we develop the practice and we are, say, deepening that quality of insight, and as I was mentioning, I think the other day, how in the teachings you have the Buddha speaking about the sequence of hearing the Dhamma, understanding the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, realizing the Dhamma. And Luang Por Chah would add a fifth one, which is being Dhamma. That was one of the last books of his teachings, translated by Paul Breiter, being Dharma. And so that rather than the idea of a sort of separate, independent Atman, this kind of bubble of meanness that at the end of spiritual progress finally gets reabsorbed into Brahman, the kind of deity, kind of the Brahma figure. The Buddha said, well, it's not quite that way in his realization, and so that it's more like the realization that what our lives are and their ground is already Dhamma. We never have been separate from that, but because of the mind's fixation on personality, on the body, on thoughts, feelings, perceptions, then we think that we are separate. And so but he doesn't use language like saying we are all one. He doesn't say that. When people say the Buddha said we are all one, no, he didn't. He said, there is the Dhamma. But he avoided using any kind of self-affirmative language as a way of helping the minds of beings to realize that fundamental nature. So that I feel that teaching that between, like, saying a baby is not quite the same and not totally different from the adult. So from the previous lifetime, you could say that there's a connection, there's a relatedness, but it's not the same being. But there's a causal relationship connection there. Again, I'm not speaking from direct knowledge, but that's what makes sense to me. If you want, there's a really a good children's book about this that was produced by it's in English, called The Mountains of Tibet, and it's the author has got a wonderful name. Mordecai Gerstein is the name of the author, very Jewish name, Mordecai Gerstein, and it's a beautifully illustrated book. And it's one of those, it's an unusual story because once upon a time there was a little boy who lived in the mountains of Tibet and he liked to fly his kite. Okay, story begins. Next page, he grew old and died. Like that movie Up, you got you get sort of death on the second page. And then as he's lying on his deathbed, the end of a long life, then there's this, he experiences this imagery of all the heavens, the stars and planets kind of opening up before him, and he hears this voice which is coming from sort of inside him or around him, and says, you can either go on into the infinite, or you can go back and be born again. What would you like? And he says, well, I'd rather like to be born again. And this voice says, well, there's a vast array of places where you could be born, and this glorious picture of the whole universe and galaxies. And well, I'd rather like that patch over there. That looks nice. About 3/4 of the way out on one of those spirals. Just that looks like a good spot. Okay, well, there's a big golden sun and then 9 planets spinning around it. So, okay, there's a red one, there's a blue one, there's a big one, there's some small ones, and there's a little blue and green one. Oh, that blue green one looks nice. I'd like to go there. Okay, this is lots of living beings on this planet, and there's tall ones, short ones with 2 legs, 4 legs, many legs, no legs. What kind of being would you like? Oh, the 2-leggeds look nice. I'd like to be one of those 2-leggeds. And then, there's many places where the 2-leggeds live, kind of down by the sea, up in the mountains, in the forest, in the big cities, in the countryside. Oh, those mountains with the snow on top, they look great. That looks like a nice place to be. Turn the page. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who liked to walk in the mountains and fly her kite. So that kind of, and I feel I feel very close to the way it works. Like, oh yes, and then we're drawn to the things that are familiar and that we love, and not consciously, but we keep repeating those patterns. So, if you wish to track down another book, and if you wish to, I feel that's a very good entry point for understanding it. The Mountains of Tibet by Mordecai Gerstein. So my clock says 2 minutes to, so one short one. Yes, I'm not very good at short answers, as you can tell.
Ajahn ka, how I wonder what can we teach my young teenagers when because I think I have made a mistake in the first place. When they were in their kindergarten, I told them about the Siddhartha Kuman, who was born with the he born and he can walk right away after born, and then after that it seems like they are like fantasies, like things like that. But when they grown up, they said, "Mommy, this is kind of bullshit. No one can walk once they right after they're born." And the other thing they keep arguing is about why can't we kill the mosquito? Because it's gonna cause us the blah blah blah, the disease. And why can't we kill the termites? It's the pest. It can destroy our house. I have to admire that I'm quite struggling to teach them how to to keep the Buddha teaching in their daily life.
Well, the a few weeks ago, I was invited to give a talk at 10 Downing Street, as I mentioned, and that was the story of the Buddha's birth that I told. And as I was telling it, it didn't really occur to me at the time, but it might have sounded like I was trying to compete with the Christians in the room. That our guy is more amazing and more miraculous than your guy. Yeah, okay, Jesus walked on the water, but hey, the Bodhisattva, he could walk and talk straight after he was born, and angels caught him when he was born. Yeah, your guy was born in a stable. So, but I wasn't intending to be competing. But anyway, so but the reason that, because the host, the Baroness who was hosting the event, she'd talked about how mindfulness meditation had a very, very good influence in Britain in these days. And so I thought, well, it's Visakha Puja, and she's talking about meditation and mindfulness. So how can I bring those together? So there's a particular teaching that you might want to share with your kids. It's called it's a sutta in the middle length discourses, the Majjhima Nikaya, called Wonderful and Marvelous. And Ananda is gathered in an assembly hall with a bunch of the Sangha, and he's telling these stories about the miraculous events around the birth of the Bodhisattva, how his mother had no pain when she was pregnant, and had this dream of the white elephant entering her side, and she became naturally pure-hearted while she was pregnant, and then she gave birth standing up, and each of these things, Ananda says, this is a wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. And then when she gave birth, then devas came and caught the baby, and then cool and warm streams of water appeared from the air and washed the baby, and then he walked 7 steps, and lotus flowers popped up, and lotuses grow in water, so how they grew up out of the ground, who knows? And this is another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Buddha. So then the Buddha shows up, and they all stop talking, and he asks, "What were you talking about?" And when I arrived, and Ananda repeats the whole conversation, and then he says, "Would you like to hear another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata?" And I think I told this story the other day, but then what he says, you're going to almost feel like everyone, wow, we're going to get something really interesting now. He says, when a feeling arises in the mind of a Tathagata, he knows this is a feeling arising. As it abides in the mind of the Tathagata, he knows this feeling is abiding in the mind. As it fades away, he knows this feeling is fading away. This is another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. So too with perceptions, thoughts, emotions, is that they can be watched as they arise, as they abide, as they fade away. These are wonderful and marvelous qualities of the Tathagata. So what he's saying to Ananda is like, walking and talking as soon as you're born, that's kind of gets your attention. But what's really miraculous is that you can watch your mind. That's the real miracle. And so the Buddha deliberately takes the attention away from the miraculous and says the kind of colorful miracles, and says, well, that doesn't really help anybody very much at all. But what can help you is that you can watch your mind. So that's with respect to that, you could try telling them that story. So then they might say, well, why bother with the walking on lotuses thing? Right? I think, well, it's a story. And then, why not kill mosquitoes and termites? I remember I was mentioning Master Xuanhua many years ago. He was asked this question by some of his people at City of 10,000 Buddhas in America. And they said, can't the ants have taken over the kitchen, and they're really a big problem. Can't we just, isn't it okay to kill them? And he said, I'm an ant. You can kill me if you like. Come on, I'm an ant. What makes me different from an ant? You can kill me. Come on. Why didn't you want to kill me? So, and it was kind of joking, kind of not joking. That from the ant's point of view, its life is very precious. It doesn't have maybe the same kind of conceptual thought that we have, but like all living beings, they love life and fear death. They dislike pain. So his response, his immediate response was that I'm an ant. You can kill me. Like, oh no, you're the great master. Couldn't do that. There'd be terrible bad karma. But his is saying, like, what's the difference? And that was a wonderful teaching that we might think, well, they're just pests. But they're not. From their side, they're not a pest. That's their life. their world there. So they love life, they fear death, and pain is terrible. So we do what we can to not cause more distress for the small beings.